Perspectives on Trauma, sharing our views and healing our world.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives on Trauma. With me today is Chris Pratt. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
To begin, could you talk about how does one manifest their reality?
It wasn't, some people advocate this whole process, where you go through intention, belief, and then, you change from one profile to another. Mine kind of happened really organically. And I think it was Bruce Lipton who wrote a book called The Power of Belief or something like that. And Joe Dispenza also talk about changing realities. But for me, it started when I had what I thought was a toothache that escalated into a brain injury. What they thought was a toothache was actually a tumor in my head putting pressure on a nerve that radiated into my jaw. So what they thought was a tooth problem was actually a head problem. And it was a big, they're called AVMs. It's a non-malignant growth. And when I had that removed, even though 85% of the time, supposedly you saw nothing, I had a severe brain injury. Severe. I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't eat without choking. I couldn't see. My double vision was so bad to have a patch on. I was really in tough shape. And so I certainly wasn't part of the 85% winners. I was definitely part of the 15% of the losing proposition, the surgeon. And he saw I was really in bad shape, so they sent me right to Burlington. This was in Boston where I was operated on. And I went to Burlington, which is where I was from, for rehab. And I was diagnosed at that point with a severe brain injury. And they gave me 6 weeks of rehab. And for the most part, I walked out with most of what I walked in with. So there was no big, remarkable anything. And I think they just said, get prepared for, But underneath it all, and I think this is the essence of what you're asking, I just knew I'd be okay. It wasn't like I went through this process. I just knew I would resolve that I wouldn't be the same person I used to be, but I'd be okay. I'd be okay with myself, and I'd be okay with what I was doing. I had nothing to base this on. I just knew, I just instinctively knew I'd be okay. And no, I still have a lot of issues. I was semi-institutional, so keep that in perspective with what you see now. And that was a long time ago, 1997, I think, is when, so it's still quite a while ago. But I still have residuals. I still have bad balance. I produce too much saliva sometimes. I have issues still, but they're nothing that prevents me from doing what I want to do. So, I taught myself how to do video work. I've done I've done 77 videos. I really get actively involved in all that. And if you've ever seen which I'm sure you have here, one of these video development systems, they're complicated. So it took me a while. I did a film called Deceptions, which is the first thing I did, but it was years after the whole 9/11 thing. It was so obvious to me that this was all an integrated scam that I did a film on it. So I taught myself how to do video editing. I produced like a 90-minute film, I think. And, it wasn't viral by any means, but I got 35,000 views. So I was invited to, so I went from kind of that was my notoriety, I guess, if you say, but from being semi-institutional to doing my own films was a big jump. I would never have been able to do what I'm doing now if I hadn't manifested into somebody I wasn't. So all the specialists, all the doctors, everybody would never have predicted the kind of resolution that I had.
So for you to manifest and to have this belief, you had to go a certain route that was contrary to what the experts were telling you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, when I first came out of the hospital, I was desperate. I mean, I was a very proud man, and I had a basketball scholarship, so I had a really high self-image. Mm-hmm. And when I came out, I had a cane, I was slurring, I was stumbling. I mean, it certainly was a big slap in the face from what I was used to. So when I first came out, I was a bit desperate to kind of enhance my cognition. Mm-hmm. And at that time, there was nothing. Mm-hmm. I mean, nothing. So I started the Brain Injury Association way back when. There's a national organization called the Brain Injury Association of America, I think BIA, and I worked with somebody from the state, and we started a Vermont chapter. Mm-hmm. And we went through all the legal crap, and I had some private money that friends gave me when I was injured, and we started this thing. And it's been up and going now for a long time, and it's a fairly big organization. I don't know if it's still called the Brain Injury Association, but if you type in BIAVT, Brain Injury Association, VT for Vermont, it comes up with what the current organization is. And it's been around since then, and I think they've helped a lot of people. I've kind of moved on and moved out because they're really part of the medical model, and I'm pretty anti-medical model. So there was I was all for the support groups, which they started and formed quite a few all around the state. So other brain injured people could get together, talk about where they go for what not, and what kind of challenges they had to face, and what that meant to them. I mean, it's a very credible organization. They also used to do like walkathons and things like that but I was the director of that for about 2 years. And then I left and really became a video journalist, or I mean, I did websites. As I said, I did 77 videos. So, and there, I mean, these were professional, high class, but I had a few keepers in there that were good. So, once in a while, there was a few diamonds in the haystack there, but most of them were pretty rough, and they were all focused on people grappling with circumstances they never realized they would have to deal with. And I think that's one of the, I mean, you do trauma work, so you've met a lot of people. If there's one common thing that I can see across the board, is usually big change in people's lives as far as who they become and who they are precipitated by trauma. Trauma is a game changer. It changes your what you align to, your personal gyroscope. I look at it that way. I mean, everything changes. And it's tragic. It's tragic for brain injured people because I was married for years, and everybody knows how to relate to you based on who you were. And you're changed, and you no longer want to be that. I mean, I had my own business. I had property on an island. I had boats, and I was just into making money and having fun. And then I had this event happen, and my whole world changed. And, suddenly I was poor. Suddenly I didn't have a job. Suddenly I was, cast into that whole world where a lot of people live, and a lot of people struggle, and a lot of people have a difficult time finding their way and making ends meet. And I realized there's a whole other world out there where what's valued is way beyond money and way beyond things. And way beyond, not that I didn't enjoy myself, and still do when I have that, but it's just a jolt. It's like a hit on the head, and you suddenly, the way I likened it when I first was going through it, it's like being on a merry-go-round, and everything's blurring, everything's swirling. You're going around, and then somebody slows the motor down. And suddenly clear silhouettes start popping out at you. Things that were a blur before because you had to do your 9 to 5, you had to put a roof over their head, you had to put the kids through college, you had to do all that stuff that relates to making a living and earning money to to what really matters, and it just becomes obvious. So it's not like this process. It's just like obvious. And obviously I didn't relate to any of that other crap, and I was going to be who I was going to be with whatever skills I had, and I knew it. So it wasn't like it was just being, I guess, aware of subtle energies and subtle things that this traumatic event suddenly made me sensitive to things I wouldn't be otherwise.
So you're kind of speaking that this event in your life was an immediate shift, or did it progress?
Well, I was in bad shape, but I knew, even when I couldn't speak and nobody could understand me, and I was struggling with really basic stuff, I just knew. I just knew that this would pass and it would be over. And I mean, it took a long time, but I remember right in the height of it being so confident that I could make it that I went alone to Mexico with a cane and with language barriers. I said, if I can make it in Mexico with the state I'm in now, I can make it anywhere. So I went to Mexico, had a wonderful trip. It was great. It was one of those package deals where, the hotel chain invites a bunch of people to see their property and they'll give you a deal in the thing. Well, I was the only one that showed up, and they had about 10 people. So I had a guide whose name was Toto to myself for 10 days.
Wow.
And he said, I'm going to show you Mexico like you've never seen it. So I had a wonderful experience. I went with him during the day, and I took photographs that I would write up in a journal what my experiences were. It was just a magical trip. So that basically convinced me that I can do whatever I want regardless of my circumstances.
So you were kind of proving the medical establishment wrong. Did
Yeah.
that lead to you maybe leaving that model and embracing a different one?
And just having confidence in yourself that whatever you're faced with, and sometimes, as you know, if you face it, you become a lot more than you used to be because of those challenges and those tough knotholes you have to go through. A lot of it is your attitude going in, as to whether it's a struggle and it's horrible, or whether you're going to try to gain something from it, or you're going to learn something from the experience. And I just want to emphasize there was nothing that I had this mindset that I went to some self-help group that coached me on. It was just all natural. I just felt it right from the get-go.
So faith in circumstances leading to
I had enough of a self-image that I said, I'll get through whatever I have to get through, and I'll make something out of this and be happy. So, what I don't know what to recommend to other people except to always have faith in yourself. Always realize that whatever you make of your life is your choice. It's your, and even when you don't think anything can happen, it always can. I mean, if you'd seen me when I first woke up, I was in the bed, and you have those televisions, and they were literally 6 feet apart. My double vision was so bad. I saw two TVs like they were on two different, and I couldn't even look at it without a patch over one eye. I mean, my double vision was bad. My balance was off. It still is. I slurred far, far worse then than I do now. And that's another thing I had. My gag reflex was screwed up, so I couldn't drink thin liquids without choking. And so you never would have thought that I would be making film and being an activist and doing website development. And the other thing that I've done, I moved into Bridgewater, Vermont. I bought an old farmhouse that was on a floodplain, so I could... nobody could buy it because they had to go through the bank. So I could buy it with cash because it didn't need insurance. And it's a wonderful place, and it's got an attached barn. And I had a friend of mine come and say, I like this place, and it's right on the river, but I'm worried about the barn. If I want to make it into something, does it have fundamentally the bones, the structure underneath it? and he went through it. And one of the things that happened, I don't know if that's here, but SEVCA, which is a Southern Vermont Community Action Agency, the person that lived there before me didn't have a lot of money when they had a flood. Irene went through. They came through and did a lot of work on the place. They reshored up the barn for one thing, and they put the big 4x4 cement pads and new beams up there. So my friend came and he said, jump on it. This place is incredibly sound. He said, they've really done a great job with the foundation. And they re-insulated and they did, certified R value. So everything that I would have had to pay a lot of money for to get up to speed with an old house, like insulation and wiring and doing research, setting up the foundations of the barn, would have been prohibitively expensive. So they were all done. So it was a great place to invest in. So I renovated the house, and it's a big old rambling house with 4 bedrooms. And then I recently finished the barn. And the website is called bridgewaterbarn.org. Bridgewaterbarn.org. The Bridgewater Barn is all one word, .org. And I'm making it into, I don't know how to describe it, but like a place people can come and share who they are. There's no, it's going to be under a PMA, which is a private membership association. In a PMA, you're only bound by what the rules and regs that the members themselves make. So you're not public. So you're not under all that crap with the city and the town and the state people telling you what you can and can't do. You're only bound by what your members want to do. They have these in states that are dry, and they form PMAs so they can drink. So people can drink that aren't 21 or if it's a dry state. A lot of holistic healers have gone in that because you can't, if you're a member and you say you can't sue another member. So it's a PMA because I don't want people to feel they can't speak openly and freely about what their concerns are, what's going on, and how they weigh in on what to do and how they deal with homeschooling and does their school require masks and do they believe in it and how do they deal with unhooking from the status quo if need be, which could be the educational system sometimes, which could be the medical system from time to time.
How have been when you tell your story, and do you ever tell your story to people in the medical establishment? And if you do, what's their response to?
It wouldn't have been favorable, so I never really challenged it because I know when I was going through it, it was when the whole people getting mild cognitive impairment, MCI it's called, and a lot of people, as you get older, your memory fails, and now they have memory clinics and they have all this other stuff. And when I started my cognitive challenge, none of that stuff was around. I had to do it all on my own. And, I studied neuroplasticity and self-directed neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to kind of repair itself. And now they have brain gyms and neural stimulations, and they call them neurobics, where people go into cognitively challenging situations, which builds brain tissues, just like a muscle. And if you exercise it, eventually, you can do the same thing neurologically with your brain, and it builds brain matter. And at the time I was doing this, it was quite controversial. A lot of people. In fact, it was the Dolly Llama that first opened the doors. He was convinced that the great meditators that he worked with were actually changing the brain's chemistry. It wasn't just a feel-good meditative experience, but they were actually changing the anatomy of themselves by mental concentration, mental focus. And he proved that. He invited a bunch of neural specialists over, and they put all the electrodes on them, and they actually measured that when these people would go into a trance state or go into a meditative state, their brain's chemistry was actually changing. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they used to, great meditators would go up on mountain trails where it was really cold and snowy and disrobe, not and their body would be steaming from that, and they would be able to keep warm without explanation, just from the meditative state they were in. So more and more it kept proving itself out. Have you ever heard of? Oops, I just did. Have you ever heard of Joe Dispenza? Joe Dispenza was a chiropractor who sustained a really serious bike injury. I mean, debilitating. Kind of through his own belief system and his own, and he studied exactly what was wrong with him, bone-wise. And then he thought of just basically mended himself psychologically to the point where when I first started studying, he was, he had a following, but not great. Now he's backed up for months, and he gets sometimes 1,000 or 2,000 people that go to his workshops, and he does miracles. And his winning combination is he gets people, I don't know what state it is, some sort of a meditative state where they slow down to the point where their mind is open to suggestive things. And then he invites them to participate in their own healing. And he's had incredible success. You can look him up. He did a bestseller called Being Supernatural. The other guy is Bruce Lipton. He's an interesting character. He was a biologist at Duke, a professor at Duke. He would teach medical students. And he had one experiment where he put brain cells in different petri dishes. And he found that when he changed the environment of the petri dish, even though they were exactly the same brain cells, the environment dictated what the brain cells manifested as. So some came out as, and he wrote a book called, he found out it wasn't what your genes were, it's what the environment was. And it's basically how you manipulated your environment to express different genes. So he's the one that called, I think it's called Epig Genology, which is the ability to kind of develop your own landscape, which in turn changes who you are. But he's written a couple of bestsellers, and his last one I think was called The Power of Belief, and then there was another one, Lynn McTaggart. She's another amazing believer in this whole philosophy of quantum physics, in this quantum world. You're familiar with quantum?
A little bit, but please, yeah.
Well, the main thing is it's kind of a perfect timing for the scientific study of spiritual phenomena. So they basically applied scientific models to things that you couldn't understand, and then from that they started to do incredible experiments. I guess the amazing one was I think it's called the split window. But anyway, it's this whole idea of is it a wave or is it a particle? Is it a thing or is it a spirit? And basically the whole outcome of this thing, it's neither. It's whatever the observer observes. And what they found out. So if the observer and so they did this thing by what they call a split window thing, where they'd shoot these atoms through a split window, and as you'd expect, like you shot paint through it, on the back place where they had a plate, you'd see two lines coming down where the slits were, where the paint would go through and come up. And that's kind of what they thought was going to happen when you shot atoms through there. There'd be this kind of a line. But what they found is that sometimes what went through there was a particle, a physical material particle, and sometimes it had a wave function. And they couldn't tell what was going on. So they said, well, we'll figure it out. We'll put a camera right before this thing goes through, and we can tell what it's manifesting as, a particle or a wave. And what they found out, it goes backwards to where it comes and decides before it gets to the slit whether it's going to be a wave or a particle. So this whole idea of this thing is you can determine what's going to manifest. And then they had this whole thing with entanglement where two things can be at the same place without going through a space-time curve, without the 286,000 mile a second thing. I mean, you look at it like if you're in outer space here at point A and on the other side of the universe, point B, it would take you so long to get there. But if you collapse those two, if there's a piece of paper with two holes on either side and you collapse it, you're instantaneously at the whole end of the universe. So that's kind of this whole entanglement theory, that two atoms can, if they become entangled, instantly communicate whether they're right next door or on opposite sides of the... So there's a whole lot of science that's falling out of that quantum entanglement.
It sounds like this, the way you're describing the brain's capacity is so much more powerful than perhaps, at least in my own public education system, of maybe learning how it functions and how it works. But from what you're saying, it sounds that it is immensely more powerful than it's presented as.
That's the whole thing. That's the whole deal, is that we're pure potential. And that's really what the world of quantum says, is that we're bubbles of potentiality, and whatever certain things trigger a manifestation where we become a wave or we become a particle, we're both to begin with. And somehow we manifest a presentation into one world or the next. And that's kind of what quantum is saying. And they're basically saying no longer, for years in Newtonian physics, physical matter, and you could all find smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's what drove everything. It was all material. Then quantum came along and said, no, it's not. Basically, the new paradigm is consciousness is the fabric of the universe, not the material world. So what you think, what you believe, what your consciousness creates around you is what's real. Not whether your father's a carpenter and your grandfather's a carpenter, so you're going to be a carpenter. Certainly, there's a predisposition, but who and what you ultimately are is based on what you choose and decide and believe in. And that's really the power of quantum. And that's, I think, a lot of what's going on in this current world, where we have, if you think of the material world that has dominated the landscape for centuries, a long time. Newtonian physics has been but it's being replaced now. I mean, quantum is not just Chris Pratt having fun. I mean, it's becoming the new physical gold standard. And they're saying, and it's not based on money, it's based on your consciousness. It's what you think, what you believe that is manifesting the new world, not how much money you have. And unfortunately, we're coming from a model that was all monetary based, all material based. I mean, what's it called? The Internet of Things. It couldn't be more obvious. That's the world we're in. And those puppies don't want to leave their mansions and their castles. And, they have a whole life based on their material worth. And they suddenly don't want to be equal to what people are manifesting mentally. So in this war, a lot of people think we're in between good and evil, between spirits and physics, is quantum versus the material world. That the new world is in a quantum world. The new world is where you can manifest free energy. You can manifest, we can start to become infinitely more intelligent than what we used to be. I mean, here should be an institution. And by no means am I brilliant, but I have a pretty high grasp of things. And that's the world that we're saying no to, so we can. Anyhow, it's really, that's what I think is happening now, is there's this emphasis for us not to realize who we are, who we came from, what we're capable of becoming, but to be always under the gun, to always be confused, to always have conflict going on someplace. There's the Ukrainian war, and there's, why aren't we investing in that? But it's losing ground. And then you've got the whole COVID thing, which I won't get into in detail, but that's obviously a scam to depopulate us and then to put us on this financial reset with Klaus Schwab and this whole social credit scoring bullshit where based on what you buy, you come up with an acceptable credit score. And if you stay within the normal ranges, you have access to your own money, Otherwise, you suffer. And they shut you off, and suddenly you can't even access your own money. Trudeau did this. I don't know if you remember the trucker strike in Canada. He actually set a rule that if you're part of we're done.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
If we're part of the trucker strike, he shut down your bank account. You couldn't have access to your own money. So it's happened. So.
Well, Chris,
sorry. As you can see, I could go on for a while.
No, of course. No, but thank you so much
you're
for
welcome.
taking the time and for sharing your story, especially. I hope it is valuable to a lot of people who watch this.
Yeah, if they ever want to go for more information, go to bridgewaterbarn.org. It's the name of the website where most of this is kind of laid out. And, if people want to get involved, they can.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank
Great.
you so much.
Thank you.